Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Return Missionary Next Chapters podcast. I am your host, Sid Bassett. Today we sit down with Erika Newcomb, who shares impactful life chapters of her extensive faith journey, mental health battles, and a tender story of a family who stood at the crossroads. She tells of feeling isolated and unsure of where she belonged to finding the courage to begin again. Her story is an honest reminder that healing rarely follows a straight line. This is a conversation about asking hard questions, accepting support, and taking life one step at a time. Erika, welcome to the show.
Thanks, President. It's good to see you.
Oh, it's just great to have you. Full disclosure to our listeners, you were a former missionary of ours, and we consider you one of ours, actually. So it's great to have familiar faces on the show. Okay, let's start at the beginning. You are from Upstate New York. Tell us about your growing up years.
Yeah, so Upstate New York is definitely different than the city. I grew up in the same home. I never moved, and we're just outside of Rochester, about 45 minutes away from Palmyra. And I have two older sisters and my parents, and we always had an animal in the house. My mom's a big animal lover. So whether it was fish or dogs or guinea pigs or horses for a bit, just a lot of animals, and I think it fueled my love for them. Because I grew up in Palmyra, we were members. We did Hillcomb pageant in the summers. I went to girls camp. I did early morning seminary, like at 5 a.m. Our home ward was really closely knit. It felt like a family, and a lot of those people shaped who I am and who I'm becoming. So.
Uh-huh. You know, you may not know this. My wife, Stephanie, my forever companion, she's with me today because of missionaries in upstate New York in the Rochester area.
Really?
Her grandfather joined the church with her grandmother, and it was through that line, because they had their son, who's D. Riggs, who's my father-in-law. They met the missionaries there, and they have some great stories to tell of the missionaries coming in and getting caught in the snow and not going home for days or something like that. That's really crazy.
Yeah, that sounds like Rochester.
That's great. So, all right. So you were active in the church, going to seminary, doing all the things that members of the church do often when they're young. But there was a little change in your life around your teenage years, and you had a sister who had some transitioning in her life that happened that had some impact on your family. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I guess to give some context, my elementary schools, there's like 5 in my town, and then there's 2 middle schools and 2 high schools. And so most elementary schools, like 2 go to one and 2 go to the other, but mine was split. And so I was in this weird situation where all of my friends went to the other middle school, and I went to this new one with all these new kids, a much bigger school. And 6th grade was really hard, and just middle school, like, I think in general was hard, but it was so hard for me. I felt like there was this weird change where I just, like, my confidence dropped. It was harder for me to make friends, and to, like, I just felt like such an outsider. But I had my church friends, which was good. I had these 2 girls that were like my best friends, and we were so close, and we did so much together. But in 7th grade, so my sister, she also grew up in church, and I just thought, she was the coolest person ever. She was so athletic and would teach me how to break dance and make funny movies with me about Jack Sparrow. And we would do all these fun things with our pets. And I just always thought she just hasn't found the right guy, or there isn't a guy that sees how awesome she is. Well, in 7th grade, my parents sat me down and they're like, so your sister is, she's gay. And she actually has a girlfriend who's going to come with us on our next family vacation, and they might be getting engaged. And I was like, what? Whoa, where is this coming from? I wish I knew how to respond, or had the tools to respond, to let her know how much I loved her and how much she meant to me. And even though I learned this new thing about her, which totally made sense in hindsight, but when I was little, like, you didn't know. Like, the only guy she ever had a quote-unquote crush on was Legolas, who she had a cutout of in her room. She loved Lord of the Rings. I didn't know. That was just so foreign to me and such a weird, like I had started to learn about it. And what I had learned about it was those people are weird. They don't know what they're doing. Maybe in even some contexts they're sinful or they're just confused. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. My sister grew up with a Book of Mormon by her bed table. She went to all 4 years of early morning seminary, all 6 years of girls' camp, and Newcomb pageant. And I just got increasingly more lost and confused as to why that would happen. So I grew more and more angry, and I started getting more and more acting out and more rebellious. Kind of from that, against the church really questioning my beliefs from a very early age.
That's hard. No doubt it was hard for her too. What was the relationship with you and her after this news was shared to you by your parents?
I think at first I didn't know how to act, but she was still my older sister. I mean, we're like 10 years apart, but she was my cool older sister that I looked up to. And she still was, but now she just had her girlfriend with her who was like her best friend.
Did you have other siblings in between you and
Yeah,
her?
I have another sister who just got married a couple weeks ago. She's about 7 years older than me, so I'm the baby by quite a bit. So
Yeah. Well, being the baby, I feel solidarity with you. And I did see pictures of the wedding, and you have a beautiful family.
thank you.
Right.
They're pretty great.
So this kind of shook you up. You said you started acting out. It was a rough time because you had gone to the other school. What was your relationship with the church over the months and years that followed that time in your life?
I think it just was strained. Like I had all these questions and didn't know how to find the right answers. Yet I still believed in God, and I would write down when He answered my prayers. A lot of them were about sports back then. Or I would go to girls' camp and have really spiritual experiences, or Newcomb pageant, which would definitely increase my testimony of restoration, and the Book of Mormon. So I had experiences, but most of them were fleeting and outside of the home. And maybe this is kind of jumping ahead, but it really kind of stopped when I started going to treatment for my mental health. So back to the middle school, I was in 8th grade when I was first diagnosed with an eating disorder and anxiety. So I was like 13. And that was just kind of trying to change myself to fit in. Of if I was just skinnier, I'd be more athletic and people would like me more, and then it just became obsessive, and I left school to go to treatment for that.
Were you inpatient or were you outpatient?
I was inpatient but not residential yet.
Not residential.
I brought actually a Book of Mormon with me, and my church friends actually went to therapy once with me, like the group therapy with friends and family.
Right.
And so I did get out of that inpatient, but I still was kind of hanging on to my eating disorder because it helped me cope with hard things. And then my really good friend from church moved at the end of that year to Arizona. And then the other one started kind of leaving the church and following certain trends of high school experiences. And I was still hanging on to this eating disorder. And when it came back really strong, because it just kept creeping back in inch by inch until junior year, it was so bad, they decided to commit me to a residential place in Denver. And at that point, I had started to blame a lot of my mental health struggles and a lot of the anger I felt on church and its doctrine and the people of the church. And so when I went to Denver, I decided to stop praying. And I think in my last prayer or something, I was like, God, I don't know if you're real, but I'm going to stop. And so when I got back from Denver, I just had no motivation to go to church. And so I just stopped taking the sacrament. And then COVID hit my senior year in high school. And so when people stopped going to church, my family just stopped going too, but like for good.
So there's a lot to unpack there, Erika. You've left your home checked into a residential treatment center in Denver, which is a long way from upstate New York. You're battling with mental health challenges of eating disorders, which became kind of your go-to over time. You're dealing with anxiety, depression. You also have this perfectionism inside of you that you just can't rate for where the person you feel like you should be. And that is a compounding challenge, all of those things. I do want to make note of this, that you told God you're gonna pause for a while, which to me suggests a woman of great faith. Because if you didn't have faith at all, you wouldn't be talking to God to say, hey, I'm putting a pause on this. You do believe, or else you wouldn't even have that conversation with God. Does that make sense? I mean, it's interesting because, we'll often have this debate with God, like, I don't know if you're there or not, but if you are, I want to tell you a few things. Like,
Yeah.
I'm done with you for a while, or I really want to hear from you in a miraculous way. So that faith is an interesting thing, but it sounds like it never really turned off completely inside of you, because it wasn't that long after before you made one of the bigger decisions of your life, and that is to choose to serve a mission. So something happened on the way to not going to church. So could you take us from that point? You've returned, your family now has stepped away. It's COVID. People are kind of locked down, and you're done with church, to the point at where you say, I assume you're the one who pressed the key, stroke that said, I submit, right? So something happened in there. What happened?
Goodness. Well, when I took a step away from the church, I connected with people I knew that had left the church. And because of that, I started to learn all of these things I had never heard about growing up in the church, like polygamy or the church's finances or all of this stuff. And so I actually became pretty anti, because I was protective of my extended family that was still in the church. Being an LDS member is a pretty big commitment. And
it's kind of all in the way
it is
it's
kind of all in
prescribed,
that.
right? Yeah.
And I was seeing it as, I know this is so cliche, but like a cult. I didn't see it as the Church of God. I saw it as this institution that was not only taking money from my loved ones, that wasn't that part. It was the more telling them how they should live and what they should think and do, and taking so much time that they devoted to it just because they had faith or because they felt something. So I was pretty anti-Mormon, and I started doing experimenting with certain things in college. And when people found out I was former LDS, we would kind of make jokes of it, because I felt like they're like, wow, you really went off the rails then, and all this stuff. And I really kind of poked fun of the church and its teachings. And so New York took COVID very seriously because of the city. The whole state kind of shut down and did the same. Like, we had curfews and masking and 6-foot distances, and we couldn't leave the house other than maybe to like go to the grocery store. My graduation, we were in our cars, and they emailed us a time to go in the parking lot and just get our diploma and leave. And we all had to wear masks. In college, I stayed in Rochester, and my first entire year was just online classes. And I was in this dorm, and I was supposed to have a roommate from Germany, but she couldn't leave Germany. So I had this dorm room. It was like a cinder block room with like dorm bathrooms, and it was such a depressing place. And I was there by myself, and there was nowhere to like eat with anyone. There was no clubs. There was no in-person classes. It was really hard to meet people other than sneaking out to parties on the frat houses outside of campus. And I joined the mountain biking team, and we would have practices where we could go outside and mountain bike, which was really helpful. And I felt like during COVID, mountain biking was my way to just escape and have time outside and doing something and not having to think. And I was good at it. And then my sophomore year, freshman year was really rough, but sophomore year, my second year in college, we just started going into hybrid mode just a little bit, but most of my classes were still online. And I wasn't good about taking my antidepressants and I couldn't leave my room. And so I left school my sophomore year for mental health reasons. And that was a really dark time in my life. And I was so lonely. So my dad was like, Erika, you need to get a job. You can't just sit around the house all day. So at first I walked dogs, but then I got a job at an outdoor store called REI. And I worked in the bike shop there. And one day, this kid came in who grew up in my ward. He was a year older than me. And he kept coming up throughout the years because the kids I mountain biked with knew him because he was a mountain biker too. So a couple weeks after that, I texted him and said, hey, do you want to go mountain biking? And I wasn't looking for anything. I just was looking for a mountain biking partner that could keep up with me. But we fell in love so easily and we started dating. And I was definitely a huge red flag for his family because he was struggling with a lot of church questions and struggling to go to church, but he would go sometimes. And his family was super active. And here's this girl who's doing stuff in college who's very anti-Mormon coming into their home and swearing and being like, okay, but what about this about Joseph Smith or stuff like that. But they showed me such authentic love and patience. And through that relationship, my view of the world changed to like something beautiful and something adventurous. And we talked about science stuff all the time. And then when I found out that Nate believed in God, he just didn't know what that looked like. That was really surprising to me because I hadn't thought about God in years. And I realized it makes more sense that there is a God, that there isn't just probability, but also the journey I've been on. And so naturally, I wanted to learn more about it and be like, okay, well, if I believe in God, what do I believe? What do I believe about him? How do I worship him and thank him and just learn more about him? So I did not want to go to the LDS church. I went to every other church I could. I liked the pastor of this Lutheran church for a while. And I went there. This would have been the end of like 2022.
Okay.
But then I went to my home ward to listen to this guy's mom give a talk because his family was so kind. And going back to church was super hard. I had been gone for years and some of these people followed me on social media. And so I was scared what they were going to say or how they were going to act or if they'd come up to me and be like, I'm so glad you're here. Like, I didn't want any of that. I was just there to support. So I went and she gave a really great talk. But the guy after her, he's actually now the bishop, Bishop McLean. He gave a talk and he said something that was so personal and he looked at me like when he said it and I was like off in the side. Like usually I don't make eye contact. I sit away and it wasn't something you talk about in sacrament meeting. And I can't even like remember the exact words he said, but I remember the spirit just hitting me so strongly. Like a freaking baseball bat just hit my stomach. And I realized these other churches, the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, the Methodists, they all had amazing people who were striving to live good lives and do good to their community and were people I still want to be friends with. But if I wanted a personal relationship with God and the Holy Ghost was going to be at the LDS church no matter how much I fought against it and didn't want to go and refused to acknowledge it. And I was like, shoot, what does this mean? So I talked to the bishop shortly after that and he gave me a calling to teach the 12-year-old Sunday school class. And so I'm like 21, recently coming back to church, like as of like a couple weeks. And here I am trying to teach New Testament to 9 deacons and 1 girl. And it was
tough assignment.
It was so intimidating, but I loved it and I learned so much. And I couldn't believe that I could do that. And when I was little, I always wanted to serve a mission. Here I was trying to come back to the church and rediscovering this a little Erika. that had been lost for so long due to anger or confusion or fear, and I didn't want to let her down. And I felt like I would always not necessarily regret it, but wonder what would have happened if I had gone on a mission, if I didn't go. And I felt so strongly that it was the right choice to make. I turned down job offers. And my parents were a little surprised when I told them. And they were like, I hope you are like seriously considering this, and like, are you sure? Just a couple months ago, you were telling us how much you don't like the church, and now you want to put in your mission papers? Like, what? I'm just confused. But I hit submit, and it was a long journey to get to the MTC because it would take over a year to get there. But I'm so happy I went.
Can I just acknowledge something? All of our listeners are hearing this. They realize that this is a lot for you to be able to come forward and talk like this so honestly and vulnerably. And we just appreciate your willingness to do it. Fact of the matter is that year was, any day in that year you could have tapped out. Submit is not final. And during that journey, that year lead up to you actually receiving your call and then going on your mission, I just have to acknowledge, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and here I am, Sister Bassett and I receiving you into our mission and us coming to know you and realize we didn't know any of this, right? I mean, you do cover some of this in your application. We definitely read your application. We realized that you had gone through some mental health challenges, which is not unfamiliar to missionaries or to us, especially with my background. So that wasn't at all a concern. What we did find when you arrived was this very mature woman who addressed the world with serious eyes. You were a sober child, and you were not young in heart. You were not young in spirit. It seemed like you were, I don't even know what an old soul is. I've heard it said, but it sounds like you in my mind, right? So, for us to have you come in, and then within a day of arriving in the mission field, you were on the front lines against a computer answering questions, or at a visitor center answering questions, or in a member's home answering the same questions that you grappled with for all those years. And I just think it's amazing. First off, it's a testament to people who stand at the crossroads of our life. This family obviously took you in a way that you'd say they were, obviously they didn't replace your wonderful parents, but they stepped into a time in your life to act as your parents. And I think that for our listeners, that's super important. We all have a village, and that village isn't just those who are defined by our biology or the people that we happen to go to school with. It's broader than that. And it sounds like this family was put in your path through REI. I don't know if people know what that is, but that certainly is an outdoorsy store. But for you, being an outdoorsy woman, is a miracle that came into your life. And that, as you, in your own words would say, for you to have that deep relational association with God, you found it in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. That's beautiful. And I'd love to just sit there for a second and soak all that in. And there's a lot to unpack along the way.
I mean, that's beautiful how you put that. Thank you. I wanted to share a quick story actually from Kim's point of view. The guy's mom was like, Kim, I'm never stepping foot inside that church again. And she said, that's okay, Erika. And I asked about that later, and she said, oh, I was screaming. I don't know how those words came out of my mouth, but as soon as I said those, like, I just felt peace, and I knew that was the thing to say. So she's a remarkable person, and I wish everyone could meet her. Everyone needs a Kim Gary in their life.
Absolutely. Kim, if you're listening to this, well done. And thank you for delivering Erika Sister Newcomb to our mission, because she was a light the entire time she was there. Sister Bassett and I would often speak of you and how grateful we were that you were in our mission. It was sad. There was, things that happened where you needed to transition to a service mission, and then you were able to go back to your roots, to Palmyra. It was so interesting, because we saw you on social media, and here you were doing tours of this beautiful place again. And I think we had a chance to talk to you on the phone once, and it was just so exciting and wonderful and perfect. And we were so grateful that you entered into our life. And well, this podcast is about return missionaries. We haven't got past the mission, but we're going to do that right now. We're going to fast forward just a little bit. So you had an amazing mission experience, both proselyting, teaching, being in a visitor center, being in an online teaching center, being in Palmyra, all these amazing places and things that you're able to do. You go home, transitioning, coming back home is often very hard. Now you're transitioning to post-mission life. So if you could take us from there to where you are now, how would you describe that time in your life?
Yeah, you could not pay me to go back and do my mission experience over, but to be where I am now and to be with the people I am, I'm so grateful. And if that's what it took, I would do it again. But it was so hard having the battle, mental stuff, and then coming home and struggling with grief and with familial issues, all while still trying to figure out a service mission and then transitioning. And I got off my mission and I felt like I would be so sad, or I would really miss it because I loved my mission. That's a part of my life I'm so grateful for it. It was so special.
Well, I have to pause there and say your mission loved you. I mean, you were a leader among your peers, right? Everyone knew you as being somebody they could trust and be a confidant and be a listening ear, somebody who could hear their struggles, their challenges, their homesickness, you name it, whatever it was. If they went to you, they know they had a listening ear and they would be seen, they'd be heard, they'd be felt. And you were sort of our quasi therapist, if you will, in the mission. And we always knew that when somebody connected with you, it was going to be a positive experience for them. You come home, it's hard, no question about it. I think a lot of people would say those mission months and years are the hardest that they've ever endured. So why don't we fast forward to now these next chapters, getting us to the point where you're about ready to start a master's program here in fall.
Yeah, I wanted to go into mental health and also just kind of health in general. And I was talking to my cousin, and she did the school psychology program at BYU. And at first I was like, oh, okay. And then as I talked to her more about it and learned more about it, I realized I think this would be perfect, if not for a full-time career, like lifetime career, at least introductory of what I want to do. I want to work with kids. I want to help them. Through what I went through, I didn't have a school psychologist. And there's a lot of kids that struggle during those times. So I'm really excited. I'll be attending BYU this fall, and it's a really good program. I like my cohort. I've met all different ages of life. You know one of them. She's
I know one of them. Yeah, she thinks you're just the top of the top. So
I'm really excited. I think through the whole experience, my most important takeaway was something I actually learned in the MTC that I needed to relearn, was to have faith in Jesus Christ and not in outcomes. God has a plan for you, that this is still plan A. And whether you're paralyzed by making a decision or you feel like there's no decisions to be made and you're done, just pick something small that feels good. For a long time, all I could do was go to work, and then I'd just come home and eat ice cream and watch TV till I fell asleep for like months. And that's not me. And I had no social life. And I think my roommates were really concerned for me. And it started by just being like, okay, on my way home from work today, I'm just going to stop at a park and lay in the grass, or go for a walk, or maybe I can't read the scriptures today, but I'll listen to this podcast, or I'll listen to this general conference talk, or I'm just going to take a minute to thank God for what I'm thankful for. It's so different day to day, but to just focus on your safety and what you need in that moment, and to be really honest with yourself.
Wow. That is wonderful advice. I can't imagine any more experienced advice and somebody who knows from where they're coming from, because it is a battle. And sometimes we just have to take a pause, lay on the grass. Sometimes we do need to just let that gratitude flow through us. And once it does, it's healing. It mends the wounds that we have in our hearts and our souls. You've shared so many wonderful things, and you've been through so many horrible things, actually, and yet you continue to fight the good fight. What would you share with those returned missionaries or others who are going through those chapters of their life?
I think it's so hard to give advice because it's so personal, and what works for me might not work for someone else, or in that situation that they may be in. But I think having someone know, whether it's, for me for a little bit, it was Relief Society president of my YSA ward, or one of my roommates, and just saying, hey, I'm struggling, or like when you're feeling a little bit better, saying, hey, in those low moments, or when I'm struggling with this is a plan that would help me, whether it's we play a board game, because those feelings of fear, of apathy or depression or hopelessness or just even numbness, like they don't last, even though they may last for weeks or months. I've been there, but they don't last. And sometimes you just need to figure out how to get through the next hour and just take it hour by hour. If you can get outside, great. You can brush your teeth, great. If that's just watching The Office reruns because you can't be present, that's great. Just don't do it alone. Just find someone that knows, and they don't even need to know how to fix it. They just need to be willing to be there during those moments. I think that made a huge difference.
Yeah. Erika, that is beautiful. Just get outside, brush your teeth if you possibly can, let somebody know, and watch The Office reruns. That feels very therapeutic. And I am curious, what was the ice cream you would have chosen that night to eat?
Utah ice cream is next level, and so sometimes have like Tillamook on sale. So I tried a lot of different flavors.
Are you a chocolate or vanilla?
I'm both.
Okay,
I'm both.
You're indifferent.
It depends.
Well, Erika, you're amazing. Be willing to be vulnerable when you feel like you just want to be alone. Because if you do that, there'll be somebody there at the crossroads, just like Kim was for you, just like you'll be for all those students. We can't do it alone, and we weren't meant to do it alone. We're meant to be able to have people in our lives at those crossroads. Erika, we love you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, President.
We hope you enjoyed today's program. It is our sincere hope that you gain insights from these lived experiences of disciples of Jesus Christ as you navigate your next chapters in life. We look forward to having you join us each week for the unfolding chapters of our guest. Remember to follow us on Instagram at RMNextChapters for announcements and updates. Also, you can visit us on our website at rmnextchapters.com, where you can listen to each podcast directly or link to your favorite podcasting platform. As always, if you have any thoughts or feedback, we'd love to hear it. Please send them to sid@rmnextchapters.com. See you soon.